Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Doctors Changing Medicine podcast. And I am super pumped because I have my friend, amazing physician, amazing human, Dr. Sunny Smith, with us today. And we're going to have a really great conversation about what we talk about, which is Doctors Changing Medicine. So, welcome to the show, Dr. Sunny Smith.
I love it. Thank you for the invitation. And what an amazing podcast title Doctors Changing Medicine.
Yep, I knew it. We're
Yes.
going to have a lot to say about this, you and I.
Yes, we are.
Yeah. So, for those of you who do not know Dr. Sunny Smith, she is a family medicine physician and she's the founder of Empowering Women Physicians. And this is her mandate, even though her podcast is not called Doctors Changing Medicine, but this is what she does. So, I'm going to start off by asking you. We all see things from different lenses. There's so many ways we could change medicine, and there is a perspective that you have. So, from your perspective, what is the change that needs to happen in medicine?
Great question. So many, but I think it kind of starts with the fundamentals of seeing doctors as human beings, right? We are human too. And I think we are often treated as robots or cogs in a wheel, or as if we don't have feelings or families or children. And I think it kind of starts with that, with the fundamental just recognition that we are human beings. We have thoughts, we have feelings, we're going through our own journey. And then the relationship with the patient and the relationship with the structures and the institutions, and that we live in a country or planet that has all kinds of other things going on, and that shows up for our physicians. And we have to acknowledge their humanity, their suffering, their joy, their dreams, their goals, to allow them to be the best person that they want to be.
So let's unpack that a little bit because I love that. I didn't see that
So
coming.
broad and vague.
No, no, but it's actually the way you described it is fundamental, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because in some ways there's a robotic stuff about it, right? Like you shouldn't need to go on vacation. How dare you call out
Mm-hmm.
sick? How dare you
Mm-hmm.
not be at your, position? You're like you went to pee. What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
How dare you have a bad day? I mean, even though you just lost three patients the day before. So you're right. But to the person who's listening, who's like me, is like, I haven't thought about that before. What is the problem with not treating physicians as humans? Like, what does that look like?
That's a good question. What I see, and what you probably see too, is there is a lot of self sacrifice, and it just never stops. We just ask more and more and more. And we are such A players. We are A plus. We are the top 1 or 2% in the intellectual games. We are the valedictorians. We are people pleasers. We are perfectionists. So you set the bar, and we're like, oh, we'll jump how high, and then we're like, I'll go over the bar, and then they move the bar, and we're like, I'll go higher, I'll go stronger, I'll go faster. And we tell ourselves that it's because we're not good enough, that we're not able to go fast enough to get all our charts done, to do all these things. And so it's just the continually sacrificing yourself for others. And you do it in med school because you think, well, when I'm done with med school, it'll be better,
Yeah.
right? Like it's going to be
Yeah.
so much better
So
as soon
much
as I'm
better.
done, so much better. And I've spent my whole life in medical education, right? So all the students are like, well, once I get done with step one, then everything's going to be
Everything's
great.
going to be A-OK.
Yeah. And then they go to the third year and they're like, oh, okay, this is actually harder than studying for step one. And then we ask them to stay up 24, 36 hours. And then we're like, okay, well, at least when we get to fourth year, but then you're in fourth year and you have to do your sub-I, so you have to super perform, right? Because you want to get honors. And then you're like, okay, it'll be better once I graduate match day. Yay, I matched, I arrived. And then very momentarily after, you're like, okay, I actually have to move, I have to find an apartment, there's all that stress. And then you're an intern where over 20% are suicidal, right? Within 3 months. This is no joke. And then it just keeps going on and on. It'll be better when I'm a fellow. It'll be better when I'm attending. It'll be better once I bought my house. And that's just your personal reflection on it. And then you're in the work, and it's just so hard. It's so demanding, and it's so unrecognizing that we even have to go to the bathroom, as you said, that we might have a migraine, that we might have to have a baby at some point in there, right? That we might have anything that any human would have. And it just doesn't really make a lot of space for us to live our lives. So the problem, you're saying, like, what is the problem? It's that we never fully really enjoy this life that we worked so hard to create. It was the dreams for some of us since we were 5 years old, for some of us since high school, but this was the dream. Like, we are living the dream. And it turns out the dream's a little bit of a nightmare.
Yeah.
And then people want to get out. Yeah. And so if we can change medicine and make it sustainable, if we can change the people who change medicine, if we can help them see they have choices, and often, like what you do, right? Entrepreneurship gives people the idea that they could walk if they wanted, which means they can practice on their terms, or you can't have me because I'm not doing that kind of BS that you're asking me to do. Like, it's going to be tolerable, it's going to be enjoyable, or we're not going to do it. So I think so many physicians just have felt so trapped with golden handcuffs and expectations. And I'm a doctor, I have so much into this. What am I going to do if I don't doctor? That they just keep doing it. And when you step out for a moment, you're like, what have I been doing to myself? What has the system been doing to me? What have I been allowing? So I just think it's gotten, it's historic. Everything is historic. The way that we end up where we are now is a bunch of accidents of history. And I think, asking residents back in the day to live in the hospitals, and that's why they called them residents, and they were mostly white men, right, who stayed there indefinitely. There wasn't a term. Maybe it was like 7 years or so that they would stay and then they would leave, but then they'd get out and someone else would have the babies and someone else would tend to the home and they could continue doing all these things. And it's just the history of it hasn't evolved for us to have a full life. And I think it's about time for us to re-examine those things.
That is so insightful.
Yeah.
Okay. So somebody's listening and they're going like, mind blown. I have been self-sacrificing for the last 20 years. Right?
Amen.
And they're wondering, what is my first step to start going in a different direction, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to ask you from the standpoint of the individual, and mm-hmm. then there's someone else who's listening who is in a position of influence where mm-hmm. they can change a system, right? Mm-hmm. So for the individual, what is their first point? For the person who has influence within the institution, what is their first point?
Okay, so there is a little bit of overlap there, right? Because as you know, every individual has influence. We're just taught, we have a learned helplessness.
Yes.
It's kind of equivalent to going into the military or going into any other system in which you're indoctrinated to believe you have a place and you're supposed to toe the line and do the thing that you're supposed to do, right? But physicians are leaders. We're leaders of teams, we're leaders of our offices, we're leaders of our patients. So every individual, it's like starting to recognize that that helplessness you feel is a learned helplessness and it's not real. And so if you can believe that there is some chance that maybe you have some choice in something, I always think it starts with what you believe about the system. Because if you're like, we're screwed, it's never going to change, it's always going to be like this, I hate it, then the result is it just stays like that and you're always going to hate it. But if you start to think, I actually have some choice, I am one of the most powerful human beings that's ever walked the planet, right? With all of the technology we have, with all the knowledge we have, with all of the abilities we have, we can make change.
Yes.
If we believe we can. So the individual, it's like, start to believe, look at what you believe by default, like write it all out. This is how I really feel. This is my story. This is my narrative, is that medicine sucks. My life sucks. I hate all this. I just want to quit. Then you're probably going to quit at some point. You're going to be miserable enough until you quit. And if you start to think, I don't actually have to work 60 hours. This is a completely artificial construct. It's completely possible for me to work 20, 30, or 40 hours a week. It's completely possible, right? Like you start with whether some people end up making a big change, but some people it's small changes and you like open the door a little bit and then you let in the light and you're like, oh, we could crack it more. We could crack it more. So depending on what someone's pain point is, like, is it charting? Is it too much call? Is it like whatever those things are? And like whatever that is that you think you absolutely must do, the world's gonna go on without you. Like when you're gone, and you'll be gone one day, whether it's gone from that practice or gone from the planet, or whether you're not working any longer, the world will go on without you. So given that the whole system can work without you, what do you want to choose? Recognizing you have choice. Okay, I'm going to start choosing Wednesdays off. I'm going to start choosing Friday afternoons off. I'm going to start choosing, I'm going to split half time with someone. I'm going to start choosing like whatever that thing is in your office that's driving you crazy. There's like, people can look up if they want to change things in the office, either Listen, Act, Develop by Mayo or Joy in Work. And it's all about recognizing what the problems are and then believing you can create like a little scientific experiment to see if it gets better, and then gathering data to see if it got better, and then empowering your leaders to be like, okay, well, what do you see next? What do you want to do next? Just believing that you have some autonomy, some authority, some ability to affect change. And then you start getting these small wins, just like in entrepreneurship, right? You start with small wins. You're like, I got an extra MA. I got a scribe. I got done at 5:30. I got like, it starts to feel a little bit better. But again, and everything's temporary. Everything is seasons of life. So yeah, maybe right now, when you add the word right now, it makes it seem temporary. Like maybe right now, I'm gonna like, take summer off, right? I mean, that seems so extreme. Like who could ever do that? Right now, I'm gonna work half time this year because we're just coming out of the pandemic. Like if ever there's a time to reconsider and reimagine what your life looks like, it's like you get to tell your narrative. And then there was this terrible pandemic. And then I started to get an idea of what was really important in life. And so I went part-time for a while. And it doesn't have to be that. It could be, so I demanded the system change. Like they said we couldn't do telehealth. And then within a week, everyone had telehealth up. Like what else is there possible that's like that? Yeah. That's possible. What else is possible? So believing, dreaming what is possible, and seeing that you have choice. Because every day that you put your keys in that ignition, if you're going to the office or to the clinic or the hospital or whatever, you don't have to go. You could be like, I'm staying home, I'm done. And I do see people, because I'm a coach, right? So I do see people who are like, yeah, I just can't go anymore. I'm not going. Like, do you really want to get to that point? Or do you want to choose something else ahead of time? Just taking, we call it like radical responsibility, where it's not relieving the villain of the infractions that they put on you, but it's saying, I'm going to stand up and own my part, this radical responsibility that I was complicit in this system that allowed me to be treated this way, and I won't allow it anymore. Because imagine if 1 million physicians, I know your listeners are international, and I don't know the international numbers, but if the 1 million physicians in the United States at a minimum stood up and were like, we're not doing this anymore. Like we learned in this pandemic, we saw how fast you could change everything you said you couldn't change. So let's change the things that matter to us, because yes, we are the most valuable instrument in healthcare, and anyone who is making us feel like we're not is wrong. Try and run the system without the doctors. You can run it with PAs and NPs and all the other care providers, but we are the most valuable instrument in healthcare. Not the ventilators, not the ultrasound machines, not the MRI machines, because who's going to read them, right? So it's us. So take your ownership. Like we are the leaders. Lead. So anyway, from the individual, lead. Yes, lead. Be a thought leader where you are. And if you're tired, you're like, I am not going to lead. Okay, then lead yourself. Lead your family, right? Lead yourself as if your time is short, because it is. So what do you want that to look like? If you're like, everything in my life was a foundation to bring me to this point where I finally took ownership as we came out of the pandemic, or whatever other thing is going on in your life, when I turned 40, when I turned 50, whatever that milestone is for you. Like, and so now I realized, whatever that is, for some people, it's like, I'm going to work till noon. I'm going to work till 3. I'm going to be more efficient. I'm not going to, like, I talked to someone last night who's like, I just decided I'm never going to chart at home again. I don't even care if they're not done. I'm just never going to chart at home.
Ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
I made that decision. What was it? 10 years ago?
Oh my gosh.
Ever.
Yeah. So because a lot of people be like, oh, well, that's not real for me. I can't do that. Okay. Then that means the system is asking too much of you. If you can't not bring your charts home, something's got to change. So we got to change the people who believe they can change the system by standing up one by one by one. And the more you stand up for yourself, if you're like, I'm not doing that, then the other people are like, hey, we
We're
don't
not
have to
doing
do
that.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it spreads like wildfire. So if you're an administrator listening to this, like, look out. The physicians are getting empowered. Dr. Una is empowering them, and they're learning that they don't have to do the things they don't want to do. We want to use our skills and our training to impact people in the best way we can, whether that's one-on-one, whether that's one-to-many, whether it's group visits, whether it's, a platform with digital education, whatever that is. We want to educate people and help people live their best lives and be healthy, and we don't want to have to sacrifice our whole lives and families for that purpose. We want it to be all integrated, because if you look back at the Hippocratic Oath, it really asks that we take care of humanity and the whole human being, and we are part of that. I will maintain the utmost respect for human life and its quality, including ours.
Yeah. I love all of this. I love that there's a million of us. I love we're all leaders, and believe there is an alternate reality. Like, it doesn't have to be this way. I love it.
The alternate reality, I love it. We're like kindred souls, because this alternate reality you create, right? It's just a mental construct. We are just, you and me and many others are starting to unplug a little bit from the matrix, and we're like, there's an alternate reality out there where you're in charge of your life, and all you have to do is choose it.
That's it. That's it. And that's the whole thing behind this podcast, is to help people see our options are limitless. Literally limitless. Okay. So you are already working, right? To be the change you want to see in medicine. So tell the listeners what it is you're doing. What role are you playing in helping doctors have a different experience in medicine?
Great question. I historically have spent my career as a medical educator, a core faculty member at UC San Diego School of Medicine, clinical professor, course director, community director, that type of stuff. And I also was the director of a student-run free clinic, the largest one in the country. And so I spent my whole life doing that, educating people, connecting with people, inspiring them that they could make a difference, that they could think outside the box, that we could see people in the basement of a church who were uninsured, right, and had nowhere to go. And they're like, but how do you do that? How can you make this happen? I'm like, you just believe you can, and you get out there because it matters, and you have a purpose, and you have a why, and you're driven, and you have a calling, and you do it, and you find your people who want to support you and come with you. So that's how I spent my career. And then what we were doing, of course, is after we try to take good care of them in med school, throw them to the wolves. And then I've been doing this long enough that they come back as attendings and they're like, it really sucks out here. I'm like, yeah, I know. It actually does really suck out here. It's really hard. Yes, I agree with you. So what ended up happening to me is that I had gotten a bicycle accident, which and I broke my arms and my face, and I couldn't stand, and I couldn't do anything. I couldn't care for myself at all. Couldn't shower, couldn't bathe, couldn't feed myself, whatever. So I had to take this very brief, it was 3 months. So in hindsight, it feels brief, but it didn't feel brief at that time, where I had to sit and I couldn't change my circumstances at all because I couldn't stand or sit or feed myself, right? Couldn't change my circumstances. So I had to change how I thought about things. And I was introduced to a coaching podcast, and I listened to hundreds of episodes, and I thought, this really is an exercise for me to think about the power of how everything might be happening for me, and how this might be a blessing in disguise, and how I can reframe everything. Like, I'm so lucky to be alive, right? That could have been the end of me for sure if I wasn't wearing a helmet. And I had a significant concussion, and I hoped that I would get my brain function back. And so as I was going back to work, everything, I had this gratitude, like, I'm alive. I can feed myself. I can go to the bathroom by myself. I can eat. And everyone was so distressed about all this stuff. I'm like, why are you choosing all these things? Because all the things I had been choosing before that were so stressful, letters of recommendation, all this stuff, like, they all got done. The charts all eventually got done. Everything got done. So I decided to train in coaching because I found it so powerful for me in that circumstance, and then in many other very stressful life circumstances, and many things that were very difficult for me with my mental health and with my reflections on the way things had happened. So because it was so incredibly powerful for me, I trained to be a coach, became a certified coach. And that, interestingly, now is almost 3 years ago that I trained to become a certified coach. And so that's what I'm doing now. And so I started doing it for people. Most of your listeners are probably full-time or significantly doing clinical work. So I was full-time, and on Wednesday mornings, because I worked Wednesday nights in the free clinic, and on Saturday mornings I would do my coaching. And I really found it really meaningful. And I went from like no followers, no nothing, no social media, no email list, no none of this stuff, to just, putting up a little website and making a little email list and being like, and starting my podcast and being like, I can help you. And I wanted to do things I wanted to do in life. So I hosted a retreat in Bora Bora, and I helped people, and I was helping people for free for 6 months, as I was getting confident in what I did. And then, like, it was so deeply meaningful, the reframe of being the victim to being in charge of your life. So that's what I started to do. I was doing it all one-on-one at first, and then the retreats were the group things. And then as my one-on-one practice got full enough, then I started doing groups online as well. And then I had to eventually cut back my clinical time. So I did that. That was sort of during this time I flew, that I flew over to India, and I was supposed to be in charge of a compassion institute to bring compassion back into medicine and to decrease suffering in physicians and medical students. And I was particularly going to be in charge of the medical students. And so we went to seek the guidance of the Dalai Lama, and I asked him, what do we do? Like, how do I make a curriculum? Because I'm an educator. What do I do? And he's like, training of the mind. And I say, okay, but in September, I have to start a curriculum. So what are the things that you recommend? Because I really wanted to gain as much. This was a very unique life opportunity. What can I do? And he just kept coming back to training of the mind. All suffering begins in the mind, and what you believe really matters. So this is what you have to teach them, that what they believe about the system and their training and their studies and their possibilities is what matters. So I did a lot of reflecting, of course, on the 30-hour flight home and in the months and weeks to come. And I was thinking, maybe this is just a sign from the universe to really go all in with the training of the mind and with the coaching. And I learned, and importantly for your listeners too, that I thought I could do a lot within the system, and I was doing a lot within the system locally and nationally. But what I found is that outside of the system, I could do so much more. I could reach so many more people. I turn on my mic in my office, and suddenly I'm heard on every continent around the planet, right? And I can reach so many more people on Facebook, and just with my honest, true, vulnerable, lived experience. And I think it started resonating with people, that they're like, me too, girl. It's hard out there, right? That's what I felt like people were sending me messages when they would hear my voice. They're like, you're just speaking my language. So then I started doing larger and larger groups. And that's what I do now is we do group coaching for largely women physicians. I started with only life coaching, as I just talked about, the whole lived experience. I'm a family doctor, so I'm like, all comers come to me. And so that's what I do in my coaching business as well. For women physicians. And then I became a very successful business person because this resonates with people. And so now I'm a founder and CEO of a multi-million-dollar coaching company. So people also come to me for business coaching. And so and I find they go very well together, because what you're learning is freedom. What you're learning is choice. You don't have to, about half of my people have some entrepreneurial aspirations, because we do a survey and needs assessment when they come in. You can't take the medical educator out of me. So we do that. And even people who we find come in just because they're so stressed about their life, sometimes they're like, wow, I could do some of these other things. They never would have thought until they just hang in a community of people who are all about just bringing your full lived experience, your pain, your suffering, your joy, your stress, and telling what it is that's on your mind, and having other women physicians there beside you in community being like, me too, yeah, and then you got this. And the thing is, we think we're not good enough. We think that we're a problem. Like, we all have this, we're not worthy. It's like they're universal beliefs. And everyone else that sees you, they're like, you are a badass, right? Our struggles are what make us strong. So everyone's like, you're an incredible badass for what you're going through. And we support you. We see you. We're holding space for you. And then you start to see yourself as others see you. And that's kind of the magic, where others believe in you so much more than you do. And then you start to believe too. You're like, what if I
can
could?
borrow their belief.
You can borrow their belief. So that's what people get from you too, right? Because when you've seen a lot of, like, I've worked with hundreds of people now who have made significant changes. And some people, what's interesting is they actually find they don't have to make big changes. They can keep things largely the same, but just realize they have control and just start, it's like those small hinges swing big doors. And so like you make a small change and all this, and the compound effect too, right?
Yeah.
The compound effect's the eighth wonder of the world, according to Einstein. And so these small changes really add up. So sometimes you don't actually have to uproot anything about your life. You just start feeling so much better. And then there's also the people who are like, they make significant changes, right? So a lot of my clients have gone on to make significant impact and have significant businesses that also help people in many different ways themselves. So that's what I do right now. I do coaching for women physicians on life and business, and I get to hang out with people like you.
Well, I get to hang out with you, and I've had the privilege of being, one of the guest experts in your program and stuff, as well. And the truth of the matter is, I love your story and I love what you do, because it just goes to show, if we could stand up, right, and say enough, and decide we're going to change this, we can really disrupt the system. We can.
Yes.
We have the power. We have the numbers. We have the ability. We have the education. We have the connections. We have everything it takes. So this is one Dr. Sunny Smith. What if there were 1,000 of us,
I know,
owning the change we want to make? It's so goosebumpy. Okay, I made up that word, but anyway.
It is goosebumpy. I just love your words, because those words, all your listeners, go back, rewind that, press like -15 or -30 or whatever that is you can press. She said enough, and we can be disruptive. We have the power, we have the numbers, we have the ability. We are connected. Right? Who knows the CEO? We do. Who knows the CMO? We do. Who knows how to operate? We do. Who knows who the anesthesiologist? We do. Who knows? We do.
Who can walk through every door?
Yeah.
Because that's what our MD does for us. We can walk through every door.
And who has a megaphone, right? Like, who's got the megaphone? The MD is your megaphone. People will listen to you. So it's just the belief that enough is where it starts, as exactly as you said. There's like genius wisdom right there, right? And when I'm like always typing my rants on Facebook, I'm always like, enough. Like, there's so much that is like, we can't change what has been. So that's a part of coaching too, right? Is that like, we can argue with what happened last year, but fine, it's done. What's the point? What we could say is enough. For whatever systemic injustice is happening, whether it's pay inequity, racial inequity, any kind of violence, any kind of thing happening in our homes, in our relationships, in our work, enough. I just decided it is enough. Let's go.
I love it. So for everyone listening, this would be a good word to adopt.
Enough.
Like enough.
Enough already.
Okay.
Enough.
Yeah. So where do people find you, right? Spill All the Beans, the website, podcast, all of that stuff. Where do people find you? Because this is not a full conversation. This is a part of a conversation that should continue.
Oh my gosh. And you have to go find Dr. Una in there because I bring her all the time because I love her stuff and my people love her stuff. And then they quote you for like months and years to come after you come visit us. So my website is empoweringwomenphysicians.com. My Facebook group, which is amazing, and I love all the people in there because all I get to do is celebrate all the badass, amazing women who come in, is Empowering Women Physicians. Yes, you have to be a woman and a physician to come in that. I'm sorry. And then on Instagram, I was Empowering Women Physicians, but I was like, I changed the handle back to Sunny Smith MD because I like it to be more me than a business, right? Like it's me. That's just my thing. It's just authentically me. It's like me and my husband and my kid and my dog. And where else am I? I guess you can find me on LinkedIn, but I don't really do much over there. I guess you can find me on Pinterest. Well, I don't know how you do that. It's just not my thing, the design, picture, beautiful stuff thing. Oh, I have a podcast. It's called Empowering Women Physicians. So just Google Empowering Women Physicians. And although many other people can empower women physicians and are just like you, hopefully you'll find me when you Google that.
I think we'll find you. I
Yeah.
think you'll find it. Now, I usually end the podcast with this question. So I tell people this is more than a podcast. This is
Yes.
a movement, right?
Yes. Oh, you're so good,
It's
Dr.
a
Hooker.
movement.
A movement.
All right. So there's a million of us. We don't like the
Yes.
system. We can
Yes.
fix it. So I tell
Yes.
everybody you have to share the podcast episode. You have to
Yes.
share this message. So what would be
Yes.
the reason why you say a doctor needs to 100% absolutely share this episode? Other than the amazing Sunny Smith is on it, but
Because if you've had enough of the status quo, share this, am I allowed to swear? Mother effing episode. Maybe I shouldn't swear. Okay, we'll bleep that out, Pavel. If you've had enough of something, or you know someone who's had enough of something, share this episode so they can go disrupt the system and we can create the world we want to see. If not us, who?
I love it. Share it if you've had enough. Let's disrupt the system. Okay.
And if you have dreams or possibilities, or you know someone who has dreams or possibilities, share this episode.
So good. So
Yes.
good. Thank you so much for coming on and for sharing all of this. Before we got on, I did tell Dr. Simon, like, we're going to have a philosophical conversation, right? Because we're going to talk about how do we change this? And for everyone listening, we're no different, right? So you can be the change that you want to see. It all starts from, like she said, saying it's enough, changing what you believe about it. There's so many resources out there. Just decide it's enough, and together let's disrupt this. Let's create the life we want. Let's create the experience in medicine we want. Let's practice medicine the way we know we should. Right?
We're making history. We're a generation of physicians, really, who I think the time has come.
The time has come. The time
Yes.
is now. I love it. All right, people, you heard her. Go share the episode and, share it with your people, share it on social media, do the whole 9 yards. And most importantly, decide that you've had enough, right? Whether that's, oh, my situation is so bad, or I've settled, or whatever it is, just decide I've had enough. And let's move forward and disrupt this. So I'll see you on the very next episode of the Doctors Changing Medicine podcast.